of Indians chase the American dream, this American man chased the Indian dream.
I'm Bert Mueller, founder of California Burrito.
But this isn't just a story about food. It's a story about building wealth, navigating expenses, and making bold financial decisions in a completely new market.
This is not a place that things happen overnight, and if it does, probably you should be suspicious.
From understanding India's consumer trends to making investments in a foreign market, Bert's journey is packed with financial insights that anyone thinking of starting a business or investing will want to hear. From composer to founder, from the US to India, Bert has navigated the highs and lows of business and personal finance.
Great quality, great price. If a company provided that, then I would be comfortable investing in that company.
Today, we find out all about it.
Hi, Bert. Welcome
Hi.
to Power Up Money. This has been in the making for quite some time now. As a person who's been eating food from California Burrito for years now, I really have to say how much this episode means to me. And clearly, I'm usually behind the camera, but this episode, I'm sitting here and I'm talking to the man himself, right?
Fantastic. Well,
thank you so
thank you
much
very much for having me.
Bert, I mean, I've been following your journey for quite some time now. I understand how a lot of Indians have that dream to achieve the American dream, right? And then there's you. Here's an American who's been to India and you've set up one of the most household names for Mexican food here. You're from Maryland, US. You had like a very middle class upbringing, right? So how did that happen all the way from there to here? Just walk us through your journey a little bit.
You know, I always grew up eating Indian food, and we had so many friends who had traveled to India. So for me growing up, India always had a very positive place in my mind. So then when I had the opportunity to study abroad in college, for me going to India then was outcome of a long kind of exposure that was positive, and then the opportunity to learn a lot. So as soon as I got the opportunity, I came here, had a wonderful experience, fell in love, we can say, and so decided that I wanted to come back and spend my 20s in India. And business became the way to do that. And I had worked in food prior, so I love food, and Mexican food was, you know, either my favorite or close second favorite after Indian food.
So just walk us through that journey of like how your experience was over here, like, you know, what business takeaways or when that first spark you had essentially.
We went to Jaipur for the program, and in Jaipur I lived with a family. And I think, you know, one thing I've learned in India is that the best Indian food is at the home.
Okay.
And I put on weight living in that house. You know, one other guy was with me on the program. He lost a lot of weight. It was a totally different living experience, and I liked it, to be honest. Also, during the program, I had an opportunity to go work with an NGO. So I worked in a place called Raipur outside of Rajsamand in Rajasthan near Udaipur. And I spent six or 8 weeks out there in very rural India, which was, again, a very eye-opening experience to see how agriculture works and to see how, you know, cell phones were just getting popular at that point in time. How does the internet interact with people's lives? And so it came into my mind that, you know, this would be good for me, and probably I should come back after I graduated. Then what is the way you come back? You come back as a tourist. That's not a great idea, because people also should, you know, make a business or have a job. So for me, business was the way of coming back to India. Right. And food business was something I was passionate about. So if I'd stayed in the U.S., would I have done a food business? I'm not sure I would have. Mm-hmm. But coming to India, it made the most sense. And, you know, generally looking at India's macro story, looking at what I was interested in and passionate about, this made a lot of sense for me.
I believe you were working in films as a music composer, right?
Yes.
So how did that journey start there? Did you do any jobs in between before you ended up founding, you know, California Burrito? How did that happen?
So I had been doing work in film. I had scored a few documentaries. In fact, I think Mira Nair, the filmmaker, had narrated. She narrated one of the documentaries I wrote the music to. Now her son has become very famous in the U.S. So I had done some work on scoring documentaries. So I graduated in June of 2011, and by December 2011 I was here. So in the meantime, I had gotten a business plan together and raised some capital. In the meantime, I was also doing some music composing.
And I think, you know, this brings me back to a very interesting conversation we had off camera, right? Where you were talking to me about that silver, the story about the silver. And this was back in college, I believe.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay.
So I gotten, my first taste of investing in a way was I'd gotten very interested in silver, and probably when I was in 2008 or so. And so I remember I took whatever savings I had at the time, and I bought physical silver bullion. Very Indian, actually, right? And I remember I got delivered to the campus post office. What's in here? A bunch of bricks, rocks? So if only you knew. So I kept that bullion under my bed until the end of college. I graduated in 2011, and then I sold it all, and that was almost the seed funding for California Burrito. In the meantime, I had dabbled with doing some stock investments, but it wasn't really. I think the lesson I learned from that was that unless you're putting your brain on it and you like the company, then avoid kind of doing stock picking. Yeah. You know, you should probably interact with the company, or at least have a good inside knowledge about the company.
No, I mean, makes sense, right? But no wonder mutual funds works out like pretty easily for a lot of people.
Makes sense. But at that point in time, my passion was sound money, and silver was a way of doing that.
Perfect, Bert. I mean, like, so you've kind of walked us through your journey, right? And now we're talking about Bangalore, and you're setting up your very first California Burrito store out here, right? Walk us through that journey about how your time was here, like the very initial stage out there.
In the very beginning, I remember we lived in a PG in 8th block of Kormangala, and they would make a big like Bisi Bele thing for dinner. You'd have big rice pots there that you can have the food from. It was not easy. I remember one of my co-founders basically got pretty fed up about 8 months in that it was so tough. Probably living conditions were not as great as whatever. It's not that we had no money, but I think psychologically we had to make this work. And so we were, we bought an Omni. We were commuting in an Omni, which we still did until almost 2020. We sold it in 2021. But I think really contained costs.
So how are your expenses like? If you could give us some figures, just an insight into this.
Well, when we got started in the PG, gosh, I think we were probably paying 5,000 or 6,000 rupees a month. And that was for two people. We shared a room. And then gradually we got a house in Jaipur. I think that was bigger. That was 3 BHK. That was about 27,000 rupees a month. And then moved to a place in Indranagar, which was about 70,000, I think, for a 4 BHK. And then now I'm here. I guess this is about 1 lakh.
How much do your monthly expenses usually clock onto?
Monthly expenses for food, maybe it's maybe somewhere around 10,000 rupees. I just know I don't spend that much. The exact figure, it would be hard to say.
You were also talking to us about Bisi Bele just some time back. What's your favorite food that you've eaten here in Bangalore? Are there a bunch of favorites?
Being in Bangalore, I've ironically fallen in love with Andhra food. Okay. For some reason, Andhra restaurants are extremely great in Bangalore.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, Nagarjuna has a chili chicken, which is fantastic. I took my parents to Nagarjuna when they were here. But I think biryani is one that you wouldn't really get a good biryani in the U.S. In fact, I didn't even know it was the one Indian food I didn't know about. All about North Indian food and kebabs and naan, etc. Biryani is not something that's very popular in the U.S. I've found, and then coming to India, it's like the most popular thing. So
who knows? Maybe then now there's a new white space for you in the U.S.
Let's see. Who knows?
You never know, right? India has moved up from lower and middle income spending to more higher middle income and more affluent spending, right? Where do you exactly see Indian consumerism heading within the next 5 to 10 years?
I often would say that our biggest competitor is home food, because Indians eat most of their meals not from restaurant food. I see people changing their buying patterns from just being a price to being value is more considered. How long will this last? Or maybe earlier I'd buy a lava phone for, 5,000 rupees. But now I'll buy an iPhone because I know I use it a lot. It's really, it's good. I watch videos on it. So even though that price delta is so much, that the value delta is perhaps even higher. And you could say chappals even. People might earlier used to buy 200 rupee chappals. Now they buy better quality ones that don't break in, 6 months. Maybe an average business person can invest more. You're starting to see that materialize in the places people go out to, even though the price of the actual product would be substantially less than you would see in the West.
So, but since we're talking about consumer patterns and things like that, right? Of course, inflation is also on the rise, and we were also having a conversation about the Trump tariffs, the 50% tariffs and whatnot, right? And speaking specifically to what you think probably might happen in terms of on a more consumer level, right, for Indians, do you have any thoughts based on that, or do you think that might affect or not affect us at all?
I can just say for our business, we don't import anything from the U.S. And I don't know how many people, I don't know what goods and services, in fact, are imported from the U.S. into India. So I think probably the Indian consumer won't notice it, whatever is happening with U.S. I think, whatever tariffs are there are probably already there. So there's not going to be a new impact per se. But I think the one thing that would be something that could be concerning is whether they do any remittance tax.
Any remittance?
Yeah, because that would be noticeable because people send money home. I could probably say one of my ex-flatmates, he works in Microsoft now in the U.S. I'm sure he's sending money back to his parents. Yeah. Now, if the U.S. started taxing that might be felt more.
Okay. So we've talked about consumerism, we've talked about aspects of investing, right? So, I mean, like you were also telling me this very interesting story about talking to Sridhar Vembusar from Zoho, right? And when I was talking to you about your outlook on investment philosophies and whatnot.
Sure, I think Kumar Vembu and Sridhar are both they're investors in our company, and I remember I'd gone to Tenkasi for an event that they had with their portfolio companies, and Kumar made a comment to me. He said, Bert, the reason we invested in you and like you is that you're basically a middle-class Indian, which I thought was a fantastic compliment.
Yeah.
But I think the reason that they had invested was that philosophically we're totally aligned, which is you make long-term decisions. I think Zoho's in fact running a marketing campaign that says it takes time. And something probably a thought that occurred to me back in 2015 was that India favors the patient. This is not a place that things happen overnight, and if it does, probably you should be suspicious of why why it happened so quickly. I think from an investment point of view, they have a unique approach actually, but I got the sense that it's they only really invest in companies that are more than 5 years old, are profitable. And the interesting thing was the founders of these companies are often quite old, actually. So I think the range of ages at this Tenkasi conference probably ranged from 23 years old to 60 years old. Wow. But I think whatever they've done has been contrarian. It's a contrarian approach. And I would say I have the same contrarian thought process. So if everybody is going there, I'll go the other place. I would certainly invest in companies that provide great value. I don't understand luxury, I would say. Luxury is not my forte. Understanding, the ethos or just the air about something. Quality, I think, great quality, great price. If a company provided that, then I would be comfortable investing in that company.
Perfect. I mean, so I didn't expect the whole luxury aspect to come out the way it did, right? Which kind of brings me to an idea, so how's your relationship with money been ever since from the start to now? Has it changed drastically? Has it not changed? How has it been?
I was somebody who always used to save. So I wouldn't, the only reason I had money to even put into California Burrito is because I saved. It's not that I had minimum wage jobs, but I was able to save it over a period of time. And obviously my silver bars did well. But I think that the only thing that's really changed is I'm more comfortable probably having nice experiences. But I think fundamentally I don't, spend. I've always not spent money, I would say, has been my strategy. Yeah. Probably, for worse in some regards, you should spend money as well. But for whatever reason, I've always been uncomfortable spending large amounts of money.
Since we were talking about Bangalore just some time back, right? This is from a Bangalorean who's been here for over 20 plus years, right? So I want to know what are the top 3 things that you love about Bangalore and maybe top 3 things that you probably don't like about Bangalore.
I shouldn't say those ones.
No.
I like the people of Bangalore. I think the people here, there's 2 types. Obviously, one is the people who are the original, the Kannadigas, the ones who've been here. And then there's the immigrants. And I think the beautiful thing with the local people is that they're incredibly welcoming. Otherwise, Bangalore wouldn't have taken off how it has. I think that the immigrant people are generally very sincere and they're hardworking, and they're genuine people. More genuine people are here because they came here to work and they came here to make a better life for themselves. So I respect that. I think particularly as an American, America is famous for being the place that you go to make a better life for yourself across the world. So I have a high respect for the people here. I think love that. Obviously, it's cliche, but the weather is really great.
Absolutely. I agree. 100%.
And it's a beautiful city. I think the amount of greenery You can see these gigantic trees when they bloom, the jacarandas and all. So it's a beautiful city. I think, the food. I really love the food here. I think that there's great restaurants in Bangalore. There's great places to go out. And I think those three things make for a great city.
Absolutely. And we're just going to breeze past the fact about traffic and whatnot here. So we're not going to be talking about that. But perfect, Bert. I mean, so see, you've had like a very unique journey. I feel like, you rarely come across people who've had journeys like this, and let alone create, the kind of value that you've created within like the retail section, right? I think I'd like to basically wrap up with like one final question, probably. Specific to our audience, right? There are a lot of, hardworking, salaried individuals who are in probably their late 30s, late 40s, who are looking forth to starting something of their own. If you could kind of guide somebody that wants to get out of this rat race, right? What would you essentially want to tell them?
Well, that's a lot of content in one answer.
Yeah.
But I think the things that the general advice that I've heard that I think is valuable is, go where growth is. Not everyone is meant to be the entrepreneur. That's for a certain personality type. If you become aware of which one you are, then good, be that one. Yeah. But learnings for us has been certainly always have cash in the bank. Yeah. Never run out of cash. Cash is king. And spend as little as you can. You'll never regret having extra money. Maybe discover if you're an entrepreneur. Go where the growth is. If you're not the entrepreneur, work next to the entrepreneur. And, make sure you're creating value. Don't, you hear about some businesses that do things against their competition and they spend money doing bad things. And that's not, at the long term, that is not what's going to create value.
Since you kind of underlined, spend as little as you can, right? Like, so one of the main topics that's like very, very sought after within our channel as well, right? For our audience is financial freedom. So yeah. Would you consider yourself financially free right now?
Yeah, I would say I'm financially free. But at the end of the day, being the founder of a business, your time is not free. So great to have financial freedom and maybe no obligations.
Perfect, Bert. Thank you so much for taking the time out to be doing this podcast with us. I absolutely loved it.
My pleasure.
Yes. Thank you so much.